So this is our Fireside chat, discussing technology, and let's meet Anna.
Hi, Sean. I'm Anna Valero. I am the president of Pirate Ventures and the owner and operator of Hook Haul and Kraken Axes.
Great. And I'm Sean Finter, lifelong industry professional, recovering bar and restaurant owner, still getting over that, and founder of Barmetrics. So Anna, technology has become a major focus for a lot of businesses looking to survive COVID-19 with so many options available. How did you get started? What are you working on right now and what's effective?
You know, it's interesting. Technology used to be an option, and now with all of the requirements around guidelines for contact tracing and keeping databases, it's no longer optional. I was really fortunate in our businesses that we already had some type of reservation platform set up. We do cabana rentals at Hook Haul, and so that was already set up, but it wasn't sufficient. So what we started to realize was we had to transition really from being an event venue in a bar to being a full-scale restaurant and needing to take table reservations and to do something which was completely new to us, which was turn tables as quickly as possible, which was just a completely new ballgame. And the technology that we had, which was really great for taking reservations up front and allowing people to, book a cabana online, didn't translate to us needing to be able to track how long someone's been at a table and be able to get ready to flip that table so we could get another table in as quickly as possible, because with all of the restrictions now, it became a game of not getting people in to have as great of a time as they could for as long as they could. It became about how do we have technology that is appropriate to allow us to operationally be more like a restaurant in terms of getting people in and out almost as quickly as possible so that you can get fresh faces in.
Right.
And so we went from the solution that we had set up was a solution called Fair Harbor, which was originally built for tour operators, and was a solution that we were using at Kraken Axes because it fit more of the inventory and the more experience-based reservation, and have transitioned over to Resi, which is built out to be more of a full-scale, full restaurant, sit-down and dining reservation system.
Yeah. And how's that working? Is it up and running?
It's up and running.
Yeah.
It's up and running, but what's interesting is a lot of these technologies are built out and very focused on consumer experience, which is great, and was one of the big reasons why we moved to Resi, because on the front end of the system for the user, it's super intuitive. And they're getting these great text messages and they're getting the notifications and great communication. But on the back end, it's not a be-all, end-all easy solution for the operator. And so things that we need on the operation side, like really intense reporting, aren't as easy to get. It's still very baseline.
Right.
And especially right now, things that I had sort of taken for granted as being, we're much more experienced retail. So we like to do things like add-ons to your reservation are not just standard issue parts of reservations, because typically speaking, when you're booking a table at a restaurant, you're booking a table and you're not paying for it up front and you're not having to do an add-on or anything like that. You're just reserving your time slot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so some ways that we as operators kind of need to protect ourselves now aren't as intuitively built into a lot of the systems. And I reference Resi, but that's really been the case across the board.
Yeah. Is there any other systems that stand out that have really helped you guys through this time?
I will speak for a colleague of mine who runs a Michelin star restaurant, and he has said that Talk has been a really great solution for them.
Okay.
But what we're seeing are, and I will say this about Resi, and I've heard this about Talk, is that the systems are sort of being built as they're flying. And so they've had all of these new users come in because of COVID.
Right.
And a lot of the features, like I mentioned, or something that's also very important, like booking tickets for events, especially right now, is those parts of the system are just behind.
Right.
And so and I will say this about myself, for all of our businesses, we're in sort of this in-between where you almost have to commit to one, because otherwise what we had was just a very cobbled together system where you have you're using Eventbrite for events, you're using, I was using Fair Harbor for some things. We were starting to migrate over to doing walk-ins on Resi so that it was easier to tell what was in inventory and what wasn't. And you just end up with a lot of confusion because you have cobbled together systems.
Yeah.
And so finding a way to really, you almost have to like commit and try to streamline and be okay with it not being perfect.
Right.
Because right now, none of them are exactly what we as operators need.
I think you make a lot of great points there. And as technology becomes more prevalent in our businesses, I think it's important for a business to have like their guidelines or operating system. Like what is it? How is technology there to serve our team and our guests? And you made a great point to say that it was easy for the staff, but maybe not so much for the guests. They weren't getting that impact. And I think reversing that to say that if technology can make the guest experience better, more seamless, make you feel more special as a result because you're trapping information that you're able to get back quickly and bathe the guest in that feeling, that's great. What I see with a lot of teams right now is that they do have this like hodgepodge. They keep adding systems on. They don't take anything away. Mm-hmm. And I think, as a general rule, if you're putting something in, you've got to take something out. Even if you're using 20% of it, like how can we use this? And a few clients over the last year have, and especially the last 6 months, have used a system expert to come in to help not only install, but like get fully up on plane, and or a system integration person. And so how do we really get these systems talking to each other in a way that's fast and efficient and reliable? Yeah. And I think, a lot of people save money by not doing that up front. You wind up paying for it 20-fold down the track. So I think tech is going to continue to be a huge part. And I always believe that it's never neutral, right? It's either helping or it's hurting. And so often it's hurting and we just take that, and instead of saying, hey, let's figure out how to fix this and make it an asset to the business and everyone involved. So it's a good segue to our second question where we're talking about, your experience in switching over a system and actually turning one off or having one run now parallel with the new one. How has that gone for you in the last couple of years and especially in the last 6 months? And what lessons have you learned from that experience?
Anyone who will come to you and say, oh my gosh, it was the smoothest transition ever. Their data migration people were great. Has to be bold-faced lying. I think that the biggest things that I have learned in doing any type of system migration has been to really sit down first and write out what do you need? What is our inventory? What is every permutation of something you're going to need the system to do? Mm-hmm. For me, what's the difference between a 6-top table versus a 2 or 4-top table versus a cabana versus what I'm going to need them to do versus the different layouts from inside versus outside versus how that's going to change on a quarterly basis, and how am I going to overlay events on that so that they're pulling out of this inventory too, so that really sort of like think through every permutation of something that you're going to need within your building, within your venue, and literally write those scenarios out. Right. And then sit down with their implementation people and say, all right, how do we solve for X? Mm-hmm. And how can I make sure that, I like to call it the guest journey. How do I make sure that my guest who is coming in for that experience is getting the best information that they can about the experience they're about to have? Right. Because what you'll come to find once you start doing that is that's where you'll start to run up against those walls of what are the restrictions that the system has because they haven't built out that next level yet. Mm. And as we all know with technology, they do it in sprints and they do it in phases, and there's always something that's in their sandbox for development. Right. And how can you make sure that the things that aren't available in the system now aren't going to negatively impact that guest journey? Mm. Do they have current workarounds to them? Or how far out is the workaround that they've already started working on that's going to be the solution that you need? Right. And then deciding from there, all right, can I live with what this sort of Band-Aid fix is for right now until they can find the solution that you need? And I'll give you a good quick example. So we book things out by the table. So you're reserving a table, and you can have up to 6 people at a table right now based off of regulations. And we charge ahead of time by the table. The system that we migrated to, although they said they could do that, what they didn't say is that all of their language and how their system charges people ahead of time is by person. And so all of the language in the system says number of guests. And their workaround is that the number of guests is always 1 because you're booking 1 table.
Right.
And so for us, that would probably have had more of an impact on our decision to move forward, because now we have a customer service issue on the back end that we're now solving for,
right,
in helping people to understand that 1 guest equals 1 table.
Yeah.
And all of the language and workarounds that we have to do in order to make that clear.
Yeah.
And so being able to know those things up front help you not only to make a more informed decision, but also helps you to prepare your customer service team to know what to expect. And so if you're going to get if you're going to get 50 emails a day on 1 issue, how can we solve for that ahead of time?
Yeah, great. I think in looking at new systems for my own business or helping clients think through it, there's 3 general rules. Number 1, salespeople are great, and they're going to tell you everything's going to be wonderful. Websites give you all the upside, but going to a property where it already exists and committing, if it's a small system, our team would do 10 hours, get permission, and ask a friend, a colleague, and say, hey, we want to be inside the system with you for 10 hours. Medium-sized system, 20 hours. Large system, 40 hours.
I love that.
All right, in 40 hours, like if it's something that's going to govern the back end of your business, that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And you're taking notes and you're understanding, you're asking good questions. Then from there, if you have the early feeling that you want to improve, you move to number 2, and that's to be able to quantify the return on investment. So if a system is $2,000, it's not hard to do that. If it's $20,000 or $200,000, there's that cost, and then there's a cost of implementation, which is the interruption to business and all of those sorts of things. That's when you're able to sit down with the sales team and say, help me understand these numbers. How am I going to get $600,000 back into the business as a result of taking your system on? And that takes us to the third aspect, where if there's 3 or 5 features, you've really got to be able to quantify that up front. Say, what's a win look like? Like, what number do we have to hit here in order to say that 3 months in or 6 months in that we're winning? And that should be across the board on a range of features. And I found when we do those 3 things, it's like that old adage of, I can't remember who said it, if I had 2 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend an hour and a half sharpening my axe, right? And I just rip through that tree. If we do that, but we often don't get past number 1, because we'll spend some time in the system, and whoever we send will go, oh man, there's just a lot there. And then you're also in the business talking to not just the person who operates, but the people that have to interface with the system. They say it's a complete pain in the ass if you're a waiter or a bartender, or customers don't like it. That's the sort of feedback we're looking for early, and then we can pick the best system.
I think you also hit on something that what I'm seeing in a lot of the sales materials now is the idea of like, oh, there's no upfront fee, or we'll just take a percentage of whatever things are. And I think people forget to start to calculate what those small percentages end up being
Right.
of the revenue coming in.
Yeah.
And so, something that might seem like a really great deal from the onset, suddenly a system that's charging you a flat fee ends up being a better deal if you look at it across the board.
Yeah. And I think most of us have been stung not reading that fine print. I know I just got finished paying for a toner cartridge for 2 years after that printer left my building, right? So I'm still a little bit dirty with that. I won't mention any names.
Something that we're dealing with right now is that there is some way online, and no one can figure it out, that people are still able to make reservations in our old system.
Right.
And they'll pop up randomly, so it's clearly not someplace that is obvious. But if we had just turned off one system and turned on the other, we would be missing these guests who are still somehow finding us somewhere on some dead URL on the internet.
Right.
And also for the crew, it helps them to see how it looks in the old system and how that now looks in the new system. So they're able to do that side-by-side comparison that I have found to be really useful as we transition, especially something that is an everyday front of house using it for guest management. Right.
I think another thing that I see work really well out there is when you, especially on a larger system implementation, we often put all of our training resources into the management team and bring some staff into that. not only for the obvious benefit, but to have a champion at that level as well, to say that this isn't black box here anymore. This does work, I understand it, and we're going to be having that person looking to at the implementation schedule. When a tech company sells you an expensive piece of technology, they are excited about it. They want to get you using it as quickly as possible, and they want to open the whole thing up to you. And they understand it intimately, so it just seems like common sense when, as you know, running a venue, you have about 1% bandwidth to take in all this new information. So slowing that down and saying, hey, listen, let's get the basic features, and we want to master that. And then 2 weeks later, a month later, we're going to drop this so that nobody's overwhelmed and the system gets used properly from day one. And I think that's the final point in there, like making sure if you're going to do something that you're all in on it. That you don't fill the forms halfway out, or if we're supposed to be tracking heads per table, and it's a 4-top, let's not assume it's a 4-top. We need you to put in there's only 3 people sitting there so that we can track accurate data as we go through, and making sure you've got a way to regulate that and make sure that you're getting people to be compliant within the system that you're going. Because today, the huge advantage is having the tech and having real-time, reliable data. And that comes from people using the tech right in the first place.
And I have found with, especially front of house staff, if how I learn is different than how my hosts learn now. And they are great about watching a video and understanding. And the benefit of a lot of these new technologies is they're doing really great resource libraries full of training video after training video that are broken down into very quick snippets that make it easy for someone to watch on their way to work or use it to reinforce. And so part of what we've been doing from a training aspect is sending 2 or 3 videos to the folks who will be using it and just reinforcing with them, hey, make sure you watch these videos, because they're absorbing that information and feeling more empowered about how to use the system without us having to sit there and have a manager sit there and show them, repetition of time after time.
Right.
It's much more intuitive for them.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is really important for all operators to consider, we've talked about, kind of selecting the right tech and then the implementation phase. 60 days out, even 120 days out, doing a tech audit. Okay, so I'll tell you the first time I did it as an operator, we had a point of sale system in, spent a ton of money on this system, and then it was working. And so boxes ticked and we all went back. And someone suggested to me to go back and audit the tech now that's in place, 4 months in. So we're looking, we have 3 terminals behind 1 bar, and we're sitting at a table and we're clocking. So bartender walks up, goes to the terminal, 1 bartender is averaging like 12 seconds in and out. Next person beside is like 18 seconds, and the person beside is over 35 seconds. And I'm like, what is that third person doing? Take the basic numbers, that team at the time was doing about $600 per hour per bartender. That's $10 a minute, 16 cents a second. You add up, even 10 seconds different. It's $1.60 opportunity cost every time he went to that terminal. And the reason it was taking so much longer, there was 2 ways to navigate the menu. There was a shortcut key that took you to a category to this product. And the other bartender, I didn't even know this was a thing. The other bartender, you could drop things on the side that were like shortcuts right to it. So once he started selling something, you could hold that down and it populated there. He's the only person on the team that knew how to do that. And I'm willing to bet that the managers might not have known. We learned that, implemented it across, and dropped that time. And you do the numbers on that across a night and a week and a year, it was like tens of thousands of dollars, because we slowed down, circled back, and said, let's find out who's fastest and bring the whole group up and learn from there. So those tech audits become something I encourage, like that you schedule in once you put a new piece in place. We also brought the POS company back out and we said, hey, we didn't know that. What else don't we know? And when you pay them, or most of them will do it for free because they've sold you something, they want to sell you something else in the future, and they will come out for 4 hours, sit on a bar stool, drink soda water, and watch you work, or stand beside the terminal, write up and reconfigure the thing to make it faster, better, smoother, and it's huge dollars in the bank.
I have even found just asking our more experienced servers or bartenders and saying, hey guys, what would make it easier for you to be able to ring up an order?
Right.
Or what's the most common orders you're getting? And just a couple small changes, a couple modifiers to some items has made a world of difference for us.
Right.
And it's stuff that the folks in house, they know what they need. Oftentimes they know where they're getting caught up.
Yeah.
And so being able, similarly, so
Right.
we can get someone out to do an audit.
That's a great point. So many of the answers are already in the building, and as managers and owners, we are so busy we don't ask the right questions. Way back to my Hard Rock days, back when I was like 19, 20 years old, when it was still really cool to work at Hard Rock and have pins all over your shirt and dance in the bar top during the YMCA. They had a system which I borrowed. You call it borrowing in business. In school, it's called stealing or cheating. In business, you're collaborating. But it was called Bright Ideas, and you could submit into this Dropbox, and if your store used your bright idea, you were recognized by the store, which human beings like, and you were given like a dinner for four. So you bring your folks in or whatever else. If it was used nationally, there was something else, and if it was used internationally, you're flown to head office at the time was in Orlando, brought down, taken to Disneyland, like if it went across store-wide. And a guy at my store came up with a new design for sippy cups for kids. He was a young dad, and kids were spilling milk all over the place. But that idea that you're constantly going through bright ideas from all your team, I think that it works as well at a single store as it does at a place like Hard Rock. So it's a great idea. So are there any solutions that you're currently analyzing to look to possibly put into your tech stack?
What we're looking at right now are more integrations than new solutions. So we're really looking at how can we make sure that we're being selective as we move forward about making sure things do integrate. So how do they integrate with our POS? How do they integrate with our beverage management inventory systems? How do they integrate with our customer feedback? And then from a numbers side, how can we, if they don't integrate, or even if they do, how can we use old school tech solution? I say old school, like Zapier is old now, but in relation, how can we use something like Zapier in order to pull information from all of these systems to create a dashboard for us that from a management level, we can look across multi-unit and say, all right, are we hitting our targets? Or where are we, red, yellow, green this week on, and why is that? We put a solution in place, and are we seeing the intended effects of it? And sometimes, to your point, those intended effects are, not large dollar numbers, but are you seeing the average check go up by 50 cents?
Right.
And that makes a difference across the whole, but how can we start to use the technology that's out there already to pull the data that we need and to track it against what our targets are?
Yeah, that's great. A few things that we're working with clients to achieve right now when it comes to technology. I think a lot of the tech that I've brought on traditionally in my business was to make something better, right? Improve a process, save some time, whatever else. It's always been this pursuit of being better. And instead now, I'm starting to think of how do we get the best possible outcome, right? Not just an incremental gain, but we get a 10x factor on something. And you start to have those conversations with colleagues around town. What have you done to get a multiplying effect? With your vendors to say, ask them, if you're looking to sell me something, I don't want you to make it better. I want you to show me how we're going to multiply our outcome in this area. So some examples of doing that is, you mentioned red, yellow, green dashboards, right? That can provide visibility, and that goes across. But if we look to go down, how do we make our most entry-level manager more accountable to one aspect of the business, or two, or five, right? You can do that this way. So now we're harnessing a lot more of our power, our leadership power. Secondly, we're analyzing this one piece of tech right now that I believe will 10x database, our customer database. Typically, bars and restaurants get the top 2 or 3% of people's information and permission to communicate with them. Those are your evangelists already. They're in. They love you. We love them. Right, you love them. You certainly get a lot of communication with the bottom 5% of people who you've disappointed at some point, and they're angry, and they want to tell the whole world about how soggy French fries ruined their week. And then you've got the other group who make reservations, so they've got to give you information and so forth. Well, we started saying, how do we get everybody in between? And there's a way to do that. If you're using a QR code, you can opt in and talk to someone and make them part of your program. If that's the end game, so how do we have the best opportunity at collecting the broadest and healthiest database for the business? When I started thinking about that and asking around, some people said that's not us. Other people said, yeah, we could do that by doing this. And it's a really interesting proposition when you start to say, we've done things a certain way for a long time. We want to continue to get this outcome, but we want to take it to a whole new level. And that's what I think the pursuit of new technology should look like now.
I love that. And I love seeing how a lot of especially the ones that manage guest reservations, are really looking to be more of what you would consider like more of a traditional like CRM, where they're really looking more at building in that information, being able to tell like, oh, did Sean come back to Hook Hall 3 more times, and being able to see that so that the folks at the front are empowered to be able to recognize that.
Yeah.
But then how are we able to, I think we're all very good about having technology that takes data, but how are we making sure that we're now building into someone's role, looking at the data in a way where how are we going to, we use the old term of how do you turn them into raving fans.
Yeah.
So how do you take those folks who are your regulars, who might not be on Yelp telling everyone that they've had this 5-star experience, but they come, every other Thursday,
right,
and being able to see that. And now how do you communicate to them in a way where they start to move more towards that evangelist type role, or just, I like to say, acknowledging them for where they are.
Yeah.
So acknowledging them for being that person that comes every other Thursday and brings their friends.
Right.
And so how can we use that data in a way that makes our relationships with our guests stronger, as opposed to just thinking about how are we constantly going out and fishing for more folks?
Right. Well, to that point, technology, as smart as it appears, like it only does what we've told it to do. And I think that's the missing component in this, is that if you get great technology and you continue to refine it with great questions and so that you can mine. So an example of that is a group that I worked with here in DC a few years ago. One of the questions that we asked when we had the reservation, when we were running a certain survey with guests in the restaurant, was, if you weren't here tonight, where would you have spent your time and money? And I've done this with a ton of different venues. Less than 5% of the operators of those venues get those answers right. The assumption is that it's the businesses they can see around that look like theirs, right? They think that's the competition for those dollars. And it's 95% of the time, it's not the case. So someone will tell you, and you might ask a follow-up question and say, well, why is that? Well, sometimes it's convenience that it's closer to my home, to my work, between work and here. But when you get that list and you take a top 5, you find those common denominators, and then you go out and shop those businesses, and you start to find these attributes that are similar to yours, but then there's something right beside it that you don't do at all that you could put in low cost, no cost to your business. And that's the feeling they're looking to get, right? That's why they're going there. So asking the right questions can take you to a very different place. And then the second thing is, when it comes to, that's asking the right questions at the right time. So with your reservation system, the software and the algorithm can pick up how long someone's been. Now you're going to ask a different question, like, why haven't you come back? Or, how do we...
Additional logic.
How do we lose your... And that takes a little bit setting up, but the idea that we ask the same people the same questions all the time, not only doesn't get us reliable data, it pisses people off, right? They don't want to figure that you've got this clumsy algorithm that keeps pounding them on the head, and then they say, I'm opting out, right? So making sure that we're budgeting in and scheduling the time to keep our system smart and relevant and keeping us ahead of the curve, I think, is key to all of this.
Well, and I think in some ways it's funny. There's an element of being human that's inherent in the hospitality industry, right? We like it because we like engaging with people. There's something about people that get into hospitality and stay in hospitality typically like it because, as much as we're all like, oh man, I hate people, we really love people.
Right.
And so in some ways, it's the technology is now just empowering us to continue that hospitality, and that the same thing we would do at a bar of just asking people questions about their day and how they are and what they think. It's now empowering us to be able to do that even when they're not there.
Right.
And I think the more that we can embrace it as a way that we are thinking about it as how we are building stronger relationships with our guests is going to be the way that we truly use the technology to empower us in this new age of hospitality.
I think that is a great point. And we often get all of this data and then fail to use it, right? We built it all up. I think back to when I was running my own bars and restaurants in Australia. I read a book by a guy who's become a really good friend out of Cleveland named John DeJulius, and he wrote a book called Secret Service, this first one, not about the Secret Service, but about these Secret Service techniques. And it was as simple as he had still has John Roberts spas, and when people came in, they were given a cape to wear for getting your hair, and they had two color capes. There were black capes and silver capes. And a black cape meant, we know you, we love you, you're a regular. Silver cape meant you were newer or new to the business. So that when someone interacted with you, they didn't start with, hey, have you been here before? And they also said, here's the journey of our story. And we're starting you here. We're going to tell you all the new stuff that we're looking forward to, all the things that are coming up. And if you're new to us, we're going to tell you why we're here and why we got started and what features everyone loves and you should try out after this. I did the same with my restaurants, where when you got the specials card that went in, or the drinks menu, we had the fleur-de-lis, and so we had white was brand new, silver was in the middle, and then blacks were like our super SVPs, and then the manager, when they're touching the table, they knew how to talk to you. Simple stuff, but you need the data, you need the system, and you need the willingness to execute on that system, and I find most bars and restaurants are missing one of those three components, which leads to mediocrity, and that sucks.
Very quickly, very quickly.
Yeah. So clearly, a difficult year for everybody. But I do believe that we will develop strength through this and new skills and talents. I'm talking to operators who, if we look collectively at an industry last year, 4% net profits. Yet I'm talking to operators today that have 40%, 50%, 60% revenue, and they're keeping their doors open, right? So I believe that once we're back up and running, whenever that comes, that collectively we're going to be so much stronger and smarter and more capable in the future to not only take care of our businesses, but ourselves. So when you look at what you're going through right now, like what strengths and muscles are you and your team developing that are going to propel you into the future?
It has been a year. It's been a hell of a year. But I'm in the camp of cautiously optimistic. There are a number of operators who I routinely text with, and we keep using the term, we're still standing. Yeah. Just got to stay, we're still standing. Got to make it through to the spring. Got to make it through, March is now the marker again, right?
Right.
And I think for me, I'm cautiously optimistic because I've seen how the industry has pulled together. I've seen how I've seen the different vendors, and we started Hook Helps when everything hit the fan in order to provide meals and training for hospitality workers. And through that, I've seen the best of people.
Right.
I've seen out-of-work chefs offer to break down food coming in from distributors. I've seen the liquor industry reallocate their marketing dollars in order to buy cases of ragu and pasta for hospitality workers who are out of work, and offer free education and doing virtual sessions for folks. And so for me, I've kind of seen the best of people even during a really dark time. And I have to believe that's only strengthened the relationships of all of us within the industry, where we are now more open to information sharing amongst operators.
Yeah.
It's a little less about, I'm competing against you. It's more about, how are we going to survive?
Right.
And having very real conversations with our other partners in the industry and saying, yeah, of course I would love to take a 50 case drop of something, but
Right.
That's not possible right now. But here's what, maybe I can move the needle a little bit in this way. Or here's how we can I think it's really, I like to believe pre-crisis that my company was very innovative to begin with, and that we were always thinking about experience and new ideas, and we never wanted to be industry standard and just sling Bud Light across the bar. But this has really challenged us to think even more intimately about how the guest experiences when they're at any of our venues, and what are the things we can do to make their experience not just better, but meet them where they are.
Right.
And I think that's where we will really see the industry. We know that the industry isn't going anywhere because people need to connect. And our industry is the one place that has always provided that throughout history. Right. And I think now it's just a matter of us rethinking and continuing to rethink, how do we look at folks as the humans they are, where they are in their life, and the role that we play within that community and within the greater community, and how do we continue to be there, not just to sell a drink, but to be there as a greater support mechanism in whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Because this isn't overcome the moment a vaccine gets in people's arms.
Right.
And I think where the industry will continue to be strong is in a sort of changing the narrative and our perspective about the role that we play.
So you mentioned March. You're cautiously optimistic that if this city, Washington, D.C., gets to there, then we can have some hope of continuing to move forward, right? Tough winter.
It will be a tough winter.
Yeah.
It'll be a tough winter with. It will definitely be a tough winter when it gets cold, and we're seeing a resurgence right now. So as people get less willing or more cautious about going inside. But how do we continue to be there for the folks who do want to come out and who want to have a safe place where they can feel welcome and be able to connect with their friends and family?
And building strength you take seriously as a woman who has milk crates full of axes and now turning Hook Hall into a Viking
Viking village.
Viking village. You're really going all in.
At the same time, though, I think that's what the community needs from us. And I think that, even Viking Village, we typically do sort of an après-ski theme in the winter. And this winter I said, I think all of us, we've been so focused on survival, I think we need primal. And what is more primal than Vikings and fire?
Very little. I've watched the series. I still have nightmares. So I can't wait to come down and check it out. Thank you so much for your time today, Anna. It's always amazing to talk to you. So thanks for being with us.